Good afternoon readers, it's Tilly here from Tilly's Shelf and welcome to Victober on this channel. So I'm sure by now, over a week into October, you know what Victober is and what it's all about. We're basically reading Victorian literature throughout October and there are various challenges and the host's videos I will link below. But I'm kind of just throwing myself into this, having not really been able to participate up to now. I'm not going to do a very thorough participation this year. I was hoping to, I wanted to read like Bleak House and Jude the Obscure and like, you know, some really big chunky books that would probably be absolutely no effort at all to read. But realistically, I recognise now that I am probably not going to. It would seem like having 2 weeks of self-isolation I should have time to read at least one book potentially, but I've done some time planning and I've realised that actually it's a lot better for me and the stress levels that I will face in the future if I use this time towards writing my essay for the course I'm doing and doing some revision and so on for that, exams and handing dates and stuff that are coming up for that. So I'm going to focus on that, sadly, rather than focusing on wonderful Victorian literature. But what I'm going to do in compensation to myself and to you, because I feel like you deserve a little bit more from the channel than you've been getting lately, is we're going to do a Victorian poetry challenge together. So this is slightly inspired by Mayberry Book Club, who had like a Norton anthology thing going at the beginning of this year, where he was reading poems from the Norton anthology and like discussing them on his channel and like commenting about them, and I thought at the time, like, I don't have the Norton anthology, although it sounds fascinating, but I do have this handy anthology of Victorian poetry which I have been coming back to at least once a year for Victober in recent years. It was given to me by a friend and flatmate who studied English literature at university the year that we lived together, and she moved back to Sweden and she gave it to me. So there are some annotations, including on the poem that I'm going to read today, just some underlining actually, she's not written any notes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you the little paragraph explaining the poem at the start. And then I'm going to read the poem aloud to you, and this one has got a picture as well that I'm going to show you, and then we're going to see if we can comment on the poem together. That's my idea. So I had some thoughts about whether it would be worth doing this as like a live stream and have it, the idea is that it would be at the same time every day, so I've started filming this at 4:30, and then as I read the poem you can comment your thoughts. But then I thought, you know, how many people are going to be around at 4:30 every day for a poetry, like a live poetry discussion from somebody who doesn't really know very much about poetry. So yeah, if you think that would be a good idea and you would be around at 4:30 every day, do let me know, but I have a feeling like probably not. But yeah, and just the idea is like, think about the poem a little bit, talk about it in the comments, and then we'll, by the end of the month, or at least the 14 days of isolation that I've got, so by the end of the 14 days we'll have some ideas of like the themes and ideas in Victorian poetry. I'm using a very sophisticated technique to pick the poems that I'm going to read from this. I've started at the beginning. I am choosing the authors in the order in which they appear in the anthology, which I believe is alphabetical, and then I am picking the first poem by them that is short enough for me to read for this video. So the first poet in the book is Thomas Babington, but the only poem they have got in by him is, I don't know much about him to be honest, is Horatius, a lay made about the year of the city, Roman numerals, so I'm not going to bother to work out, and it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 pages long, and I don't think any of us really want that. So I thought about just reading a verse, but I thought without reading the whole poem to know what I was commenting on, it wouldn't really be fair. So the second poet in the book is Elizabeth Barrett Browning, who lived from 1806 to 1861. And the poem that I have selected from her, the first short poem by her, is Hiram Powers Greek Slave, which was written or published in 1850. So I am going to read the introduction for that now, and then I'm going to read the poem. Robert and Elizabeth Barrett Browning knew the North American sculptor Hiram Powers, 1805 to 73, who lived for much of his life in Florence, where the Brownings also lived after their marriage. Powers' well-known and controversial statue, The Greek Slave, was completed in 1843 and depicts supposedly a Greek woman about to be sold into slavery by the Turks during the struggle for Greek independence, which finally concluded in 1832. To what extent the political association was Powers' shrewd device to legitimate the depiction of a full nude is not of interest to Barrett Browning, neither is the question of the troubling eroticism of the statue. Barrett Browning may have seen it, or one of its various replicas, either in Florence or London, where it was first exhibited in 1845. Her sonnet, characterised, as her sonnets mostly are, by fluid language that sounds as if spoken, by syntax that is not confined to the line length for its unit of sense, is buoyant about the power of art to effect political and social change, and confident in its identification of that power with a woman. Like the Cry of the Children, 25 to 29, Hiram Powers' Greek... That's a different poem by her, sorry. Hiram Powers' Greek Slave explores the expressive powers of the silent or silenced. Barrett Browning's own family's involvement with slavery adds further energy to its poised outrage. And just so you can see the statue, they have included a picture of it. So yeah, definitely a little bit of eroticisation there of somebody supposedly being sold into slavery, looking pretty chilled and pretty seductive. But anyway, let's move on to the actual poem. They say ideal beauty cannot enter the house of anguish. On the threshold stands an alien image with enshackled hands, called the Greek Slave, as if the artist meant her that passionless perfection which he lent her, shadowed, not darkened, where the sill expands, to so confront man's crimes in different lands with man's ideal sense. Pierce to the centre art's fiery finger, and break up ere long the serfdom of this world. Appeal, fair stone, from God's pure heights of beauty against man's wrong. Catch up in thy divine face, not alone east griefs, but west, and strike and shame the strong by thunders of white silence overthrown. So I thought when I read this before I decided to read it out, that it's an interesting poem and it's interestingly relevant to some of the things that we've seen this year, even though it is, quick maths, 170 years old. Oh, that's the bread machine. Oh, I'll get it in a sec. The thing that so it's relevant in that it's talking about oppression and slavery and the ramifications of slavery and sort of racial implications as well. I don't know that much about this Greek-Turkish struggle that was going on at that time, but it's fair to say that she argues that this idealised figure of a woman is representative of all of those struggling with serfdom worldwide. When she says, not alone east griefs but west, there is a little note that says that she is there implying that it shouldn't only be, the poem shouldn't only be seen as referring to the struggle in the east, but also the ongoing struggle in the west. So I think it's relevant to say that slavery was abolished in the British Empire gradually over the course of 1833 to 1838, and in the US obviously it wasn't until the 13th Amendment in 1865. Obviously there was like an ongoing process leading up to that, but it was very much a current issue at the time. The idea of slavery and abolitionism was quite a prominent political movement on both sides of the Atlantic in the preceding decades and subsequently. What I find slightly troubling about this poem is this idea that it's the woman's beauty that is the most important thing in the fact that she's being made into a slave, and the idea that her beauty and her perfection, as gifted by God, according to the poet, is what should make people pause for thought about the fact that she is being made into a slave. I think that that's something that we probably should find troubling now. We probably wouldn't say that only beautiful people shouldn't be enslaved. And I'm sure that's not really the intention behind it, but it fits in with, according to my perception, a wider theme in Victorian literature that good people are always beautiful, and they, even if they are poor and enduring hardships and so on, you know, if they look good, chances are their character is good on the inside, and that's the thing that they should be judged on. So basically, she's saying that this woman, like stripped down to be completely naked, should be judged on her beauty, and her beauty alone should kind of buy her out of slavery. I don't know whether my interpretation is wrong there, and yeah, and she'd. And ideal beauty cannot enter the house of anguish. So she's saying that this woman is ideally beautiful and therefore she can't be completely anguished, that she can't suffer completely from the pain of being enslaved, is again a little bit complex and difficult. I've only read this poem, I should say, 5 minutes before I started filming this, so I'm kind of working out my thoughts as I talk to you here. Again, that passionless perfection thing is like what I said when I showed you the picture of the statue. It looks really chilled and really calm, and he hasn't tried to imbue that statue with any anguish. So maybe that's kind of what she's drawing on and saying, like, almost the poise of this woman in this situation and the dignity that she has is representative of the unalterable dignity of the human being in response to times of challenge. I don't know. I think the last few lines, and particularly the last kind of like line of sense, I suppose, is something that is perhaps continues to be relevant today, and is the lines that I felt had the most resonance for the present. Strike and shame the strong by thunders of white silence overthrown. And I think that idea of white silence and the reluctance that there has been to confront the racial hierarchies and racial issues and human issues, like issues where people are suffering massive inequality and disadvantage. That is something that we've very much been talking about this year, and it's very interesting to see almost like a phrase, like I feel like the phrase of white silence is one that we might actively use, or we might talk about how people are reluctant. We definitely talk about how people are reluctant to maybe speak out on certain issues, and it was interesting to see that phrasing in a poem from so long ago. So yeah, overall, I should say it's a sonnet form, so it is a very, very short poem, and she has got some other sonnets in the next section, so it's obviously a form that she particularly liked to use. I felt like that matched quite well with the statue, because the statue is like in the style of an ancient Greek or Roman statue, and obviously it is a statue of supposedly a Greek woman, and so it's like an archaic style of statue, I suppose, and she's fitted it with quite an old form of poetry, obviously not as old as the Greeks and the Romans, but a more traditional form of poem to kind of match with that. I think, yeah. On the whole, I really like Victorian poetry because they really they do it right. They don't mess around. They really there's rhymes, like the rhyme in this: enter, stands, her, expands, lands, centre, long, stone, wrong, alone, strong, overthrown. Like you can see, there's a couple of half rhymes, but it is quite strict. It doesn't really give way in the way that maybe a modern poem would, where it would sometimes rhyme and sometimes not rhyme, and be a bit more flexible. I like the way Victorian poets really pushed themselves to achieve the strict rhyme that was felt to be necessary for the form. But it is, as the introduction said, it is quite a free moving poem, so even though it's got that strict rhyming structure, it does feel like it flows quite well, and it feels like it's got a kind of like a power to it that perhaps I didn't read very well, but it does seem like it possesses a bit of an argument in the rhythm that it has. So anyway, I enjoyed reading that, and I hope you enjoyed listening to it. I think, just in case it has become a little bit unclear, I'm going to reread it again at the end so that you have another chance to think about all of the different words and phrases, and if there is anything that you would like to comment on, please comment below. I think that could be quite fun, but also if you don't want to, then obviously don't. They say ideal beauty cannot enter the house of anguish. On the threshold stands an alien image with enshackled hands, called the Greek slave, as if the artist meant her that passionless perfection which he lent her, shadowed, not darkened, where the sill expands, to so confront man's crimes in different lands with man's ideal sense. Pierce to the centre art's fiery finger, and break up ere long the serfdom of this world. Appeal, fair stone, from God's pure heights of beauty against man's wrong. Catch up in thy divine face, not alone East Greeks, but West, and strike and shame the strong by thunders of white silence overthrown. Yeah, there was another bit that I didn't really talk about the power of art, but I think I will leave that there. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you like the idea. Let me know what you think, and take care, and I hope you're all enjoying Victober.